Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. Emma Yumap, if I had to live my whole life in a new face, I'd want it to be your face, the female version. I said it as a half joke, the kind of thing you murmur into your wife's hair in the quiet of the morning when the world hasn't quite woken up yet. But like all my jokes, a sliver of painful truth was lodged deep inside it. We were standing in front of the large antique mirror in our bedroom. My reflection stared back, a stranger in a stiff white button-down shirt and a charcoal gray suit. I fumbled with the tie, a Windsor knot that felt more like a noose with every clumsy twist. The fabric was coarse against my skin, a constant, abrasive reminder that I was wearing a costume. This was Robert's armor for the corporate battlefield, and I hated every thread of it. Emma stepped behind me, her presence a soft warmth that seeped through the rigid layers of my clothing. Her arms circled my waist, her cheek pressing against my back. I could feel her sigh, a gentle breath that carried a universe of understanding. "I know you don't like this suit, honey," she whispered, her voice a low, comforting hum against my shoulder blades. "But it's just for a few days. When you get back, we'll let Olivia come out to play again." A weak smile touched my lips, but it didn't reach my eyes. Olivia. The name alone sent a pang through my chest, a sharp, bittersweet ache, like a secret door being forced shut. Olivia was the me that existed only within these four walls, the me that Emma loved into existence. She was the silk dresses, the soft cardigans, the quiet confidence I felt when my body was draped in fabrics that felt like a second skin instead of a cage. Robert was the man going on a business trip. Olivia was the woman being left behind. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. My gaze drifted from my own pained reflection to the closet door, where a slip of emerald green silk was hanging. It was my favorite dress, one Emma had bought for me on a whim. She'd said the color matched my eyes. Though I'd never seen it myself, I'd worn it last weekend, and for a few precious hours, the man in the mirror had vanished completely. Now, it hung there like a promise, a beacon calling me home. "I'll miss you," I managed to say, turning to kiss her. The kiss was brief, careful not to smudge her lipstick. I was always so careful. Leaving the house felt like shedding a part of my soul. Each step in my heavy, polished dress shoes was a move away from the sanctuary of our home, away from Olivia, away from myself. The meetings were a blur of PowerPoint presentations, forced handshakes, and stale coffee. I played the part of Robert well, nodding at the right times, offering strategic insights with a voice that felt borrowed, too deep and assertive. All the while, my mind was adrift, thinking of the feel of lace against my skin, the gentle sway of a skirt around my knees. I was living a double life, and the strain was carving fine lines around my eyes. The taxi ride to the airport was supposed to be the final stretch of this charade. The city lights streaked past the window, a smear of gold and white against the deepening twilight. I leaned my head against the cool glass, letting the exhaustion of the past few days wash over me. My thoughts turned homeward, to Emma. I pictured her waiting for me, pictured the careful way she would help me undo my tie, unbutton my shirt. I wondered which outfit she might pick out for Olivia to wear tonight. Maybe the honey brown wig, the one that fell in soft waves just past my shoulders, or the sleek, black bob that made me feel so sophisticated and bold. A smile finally found its way to my face, genuine and unforced. It was the first one all day. Then the world exploded. A piercing screech of tires, a brutal shriek of twisting metal that tore through the air. The taxi spun violently, the city lights becoming a dizzying, chaotic carousel. There was a blinding flash of white, a concussive force that threw me forward, and then nothing, just a deep, silent, all-encompassing darkness. My first sensation upon returning to the world was pain, a raw, searing fire that spread from my temple down to my jaw. It was a constant, throbbing ache, punctuated by a cold, tight sensation across my face every time I tried to move. Bandages, my face was covered in them. The sterile white ceiling of a hospital room slowly swam into focus. The rhythmic beep of a machine beside me was a steady drumbeat in the quiet room. I tried to turn my head and a soft hand immediately found mine, squeezing gently. Emma. She was sitting by my bedside, her eyes red-rimmed and shadowed with worry. but her grip was firm, an anchor in my sea of confusion. "You're safe. Rob, you're safe now," she said, her voice trembling just enough to betray the calm she was trying to project. The door swished open and a doctor and a nurse walked in. Their faces were serious but kind, their expressions conveying a practiced sort of compassion that didn't quite mask the gravity of the situation. "Mr. Miller," the doctor began, his voice calm and even. "I'm Dr. Evans. You were in a serious accident. You're very lucky. But the right side of your face sustained significant trauma. We're going to need to perform reconstructive surgery." I listened to his words, but they felt distant, as if he were talking about someone else. My mind felt thick and slow, like it was wading through mud. Reconstructive surgery, my face, the face I saw in the mirror every morning, the face of a man I barely recognized, was broken. The thought should have terrified me. It should have sent me into a spiral of panic and despair. Instead, a strange electric possibility flickered to life in the fog, an idea so audacious, so terrifying, so profoundly right that it took my breath away. I let out a long, shuddering breath. My lips felt swollen and clumsy as I tried to form the words. My voice, when it came out, was a dry, raspy whisper. "Doctor," I started, my eyes darting from his face to Emma's. I saw nothing but love and concern there. It gave me the courage to continue. If you have to rebuild it, is it possible? Could you build it in a way that's a little more feminine? The question hung in the air, thick and heavy. The beeping of the heart monitor seemed to grow louder in the sudden, profound silence. Dr. Evans's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. He was a professional, but this was clearly not a request he received every day. It was the nurse who broke the spell. She stepped forward and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was warm, grounding. Her eyes were impossibly kind. "If that's what you want," she said softly, her voice devoid of judgment, "you can tell us more. It's okay." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, blurring her gentle face. It was the "it's okay" that broke me. I turned my gaze back to Emma, my silent plea hanging between us. She wasn't surprised. There was no shock, no confusion in her expression, only a deep, unwavering love that I had done nothing to deserve. She leaned in close, her hand moving from my hand to my chest, resting directly over my heart. "I've always known Olivia was in here," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "If this is her chance to come out, I want you to take it, my love. I want you to take it." And in that sterile white room, surrounded by the scent of antiseptic and the sound of my own unsteady heartbeat, I felt the first fracture of my old life give way, not to despair, but to a terrifying, exhilarating hope. The face of Robert Miller was broken, but for the first time, I believed the face of Olivia could finally be whole. The days that followed were a whirlwind of consultations and conversations that felt more surreal than the accident itself. Dr. Evans, it turned out, was not just a trauma surgeon. He was one of the best craniofacial specialists in the country. He had seen every kind of injury imaginable. But my request took him into a territory that blended medicine with identity in a way that was new even for him. Facial feminization is typically an elective process. Robert, he explained during one of our long talks, his voice patient and measured. It involves a series of procedures, rhinoplasty to refine the nose, a brow lift, jaw and chin contouring, sometimes cheek implants. We're in a unique position here. The trauma has necessitated a complete reconstruction. We aren't just modifying, we're rebuilding from the ground up. This gives us options. The nurse, whose name I learned was Mira, became my gentle guide through this strange new world. She would come into my room with a tablet, her presence a calming balm against my jangling nerves. Together, the three of us would spend hours looking at digital renderings and anatomical diagrams. "So, what we can do," Mira said, pointing to a 3D model of a skull on the screen, "is soften the orbital rims here. See how that opens up the eyes, gives them a less hooded, more almond shape." She swiped, and the model shifted. And for the jawline, instead of the traditional strong, angular, male jaw, we can taper it, creating a softer, more heart-shaped face. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't a medical illustration I was seeing. It was a ghost. a phantom image of the woman I'd only ever dared to dream about. Each proposed change: a narrower nose, fuller cheeks, a less prominent chin felt like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place. This wasn't about vanity, it was about recognition. I was looking for a reflection I could finally call my own. "Can you make the lips fuller?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dr. Evans nodded. "We can do that. A lip lift will shorten the distance between your nose and upper lip, which is a classic female trait. We can use fillers later for more volume if you wish." Emma sat through every meeting, her hand always finding mine. She asked practical questions I was too overwhelmed to think of about recovery times, about potential risks, about scarring, but her most important question was directed at me. "Does this feel right to you, Rob?" she asked one evening, after the doctors had left. "Does this face feel like you?" I looked at the latest rendering on Mira's tablet, a face that was still a stranger but one that held a flicker of familiarity in the eyes. "It feels like coming home," I confessed. With the surgical plan in motion, another equally significant journey began. Dr. Evans brought in a specialist, an endocrinologist named Dr. Reed, to talk about hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. "Starting estrogen now, even before the surgeries are complete, can aid the process," Dr. Reed explained. "It will begin to redistribute your body fat, soften your skin, and initiate other changes that will align your body more closely with the facial structure we're aiming for. But you need to understand, this is a profound, systemic change. Robert, it will affect you emotionally as well as physically." Emma held the consent forms, her knuckles white. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine for any hint of doubt. "Are you sure?" I nodded, a wave of certainty washing over me, so powerful it eclipsed all fear. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She signed the papers. The first dose of estrogen wasn't a dramatic, life-altering event. It was a small pale blue pill that I washed down with a sip of water. It was anticlimactic, yet I lay in bed for hours afterward, trying to feel a change, a shift in my very cells. Nothing happened. Of course, not yet, but in my mind, a clock had started ticking, counting down to the arrival of a person I had waited my entire life to meet. A few days later, while my face was still a mess of bandages and swelling, Emma arrived for her daily visit with a large, beautiful gift bag. Her eyes sparkled with a familiar, mischievous light that I hadn't seen since before the accident. "I know you can't see yourself right now," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "but I figured Olivia could at least feel something beautiful." She pulled out a set of pajamas from the bag. They were made of a delicate, pale pink satin, so soft and lustrous it seemed to catch the dull hospital light and make it shimmer. It consisted of a simple camisole with thin spaghetti straps and a matching pair of shorts trimmed with a whisper of white lace. My breath hitched. My hands, clumsy and trembling, reached out to touch the fabric. The moment my fingers brushed against the satin, a jolt like a gentle electric current shot up my arm. It was exquisite. The material was cool and impossibly smooth, like liquid silk pouring through my fingers. "Help me," I whispered to Emma. Carefully, she helped me out of the rough, starchy hospital gown. The cool air of the room on my bare skin was a shock, but it was nothing compared to the sensation that followed. As she slipped the satin camisole over my head, the fabric glided over my chest and stomach. It didn't just lie on my skin, it caressed it. It whispered to it, every nerve ending, dulled by pain medication and trauma, suddenly woke up, tingling with a pleasure so pure and intense it brought tears to my eyes. The rough cotton sheets of the hospital bed felt like sandpaper in comparison. The stiff bandages on my face felt like a cruel cage. But this satin against my skin was a taste of freedom. It was a promise. Lying there in the dark, long after Emma had gone home, I ran my hands over my own body, over the impossibly soft fabric, for the first time since the crash. I wasn't thinking about the pain in my face. I was thinking about the body beneath the pajamas, a body that was slowly, miraculously, beginning its journey toward becoming Olivia's home. This was the first real touch, the first true sensation of a version of me that had finally been given permission to exist. The next few months became a repeating cycle of anesthesia and recovery. One surgery blurred into the next. First, they worked on the foundational bone structure, the orbital rims and the jaw. Then came the delicate work on my nose, Reshaping the bridge and tip another time. It was a brow lift and a procedure to lower my hairline. Each time I was wheeled into the stark, cold operating room, a wave of fear threatened to pull me under, but it was always followed by a stronger current of hope. This is for Olivia, I would tell myself, just before the world faded to black. Waking up was always the same disorienting experience. A groggy, slow return to consciousness, the dull ache in my face, and the ever-present tightness of new bandages. But Emma was always there. A constant, reassuring presence. She would be holding my hand when I opened my eyes. Her smile the first thing I saw. "How do you feel?" she'd ask. "Like I got hit by a truck. Again," I'd croak, my throat raw from the intubation tube. She'd laugh softly, a sound that was better than any pain medicine. "Well, you look beautiful under all that." I couldn't see the changes myself. Not at first. They were hidden beneath layers of gauze and swelling and purple-green bruises. But I could feel them. I felt the subtle shift in the way my skin stretched when I tried to smile. I felt the new, delicate curve of my jaw when I traced it with my fingertips. My eyelids felt heavier, but in a way that seemed to soften my gaze. These were tiny, almost imperceptible changes, but to me, they were seismic shifts in the landscape of my identity. Olivia was being built, piece by painstaking piece. The day Mira came to remove the last of the major bandages was a day I had been anticipating with a mixture of intense excitement and paralyzing dread. What if I didn't see her? What if, after all this, I still just saw a broken version of Robert? "Are you ready?" Mira asked, her voice gentle as she stood beside me in the sterile recovery room. A large mirror was mounted on the wall in front of me. I had been avoiding my reflection for weeks, catching only frightening, swollen glimpses in reflective surfaces. I took a deep, shaky breath and nodded. I couldn't speak. My throat was desert dry. Emma stood behind me, her hands resting firmly on my shoulders, her chin on my head. Her strength flowed into me. Slowly, carefully, Mira began to unwind the white gauze. With each turn, more of my skin was revealed to the light. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, unable to bear the suspense. Finally, the last piece of tape was peeled away. "Okay," Mira whispered, "you can look now." My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. I opened my eyes. For a long moment, I just stared, trying to process the person staring back at me. It wasn't Robert, the man with the sharp jaw, the heavy brow, and the weary eyes was gone. In his place was a stranger, a person with a delicate, oval face. The nose was straight and fine, the eyes large and open beneath softly arched brows. The lips were fuller, gently curved. The face was still puffy and bruised from the final procedures, a canvas of pale skin and faded yellow contusions. But the underlying structure, it was undeniably feminine. It was soft. A strangled sound escaped my lips, a half sob, half gasp. Is this me?" I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. My hand rose, my fingers hovering just inches from the glass, as if I was afraid to touch the image, afraid it would shatter. I saw the all flicker of my old self in the deep green of the eyes, but everything surrounding them was new. It wasn't Emma's face, not exactly, but it was a face that looked like it could be her sister or her cousin. It was a face that belonged in the same family of beauty and grace. Emma hugged me tightly from behind, her own tears warm on my shoulder. "This is Olivia," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "She's been growing all this time, and she's so beautiful." I looked at her reflection in the mirror, her beaming, tear-streaked face next to my new, uncertain one, and for the first time, looking at my own reflection, I didn't feel a sense of disconnection. I felt a flicker of recognition, a spark of belonging. This was the start. This was her. This was me. As the swelling subsided and the healing progressed, my confidence grew in tiny increments. The first major step was trying on real clothes again. The pink satin pajamas had been my nightly comfort, but I yearned for something more. One afternoon, Emma arrived with another one of her magical bags. "I thought Olivia might be ready for her first dress," she announced. She pulled out a midi dress made of a soft, flowing rayon. It was the color of a summer sky just before sunset, a dusky blue patterned with tiny white wildflowers. It had short, puffed sleeves and a simple V-neck. It looked impossibly light and gentle. My hands shook as I took it from her. I don't know. Emma, my body, it's still so... I trailed off, gesturing vaguely to my still masculine frame. The HRT had started to soften my skin and add a hint of fat to my hips, but I was still lanky, my shoulders still broader than I wanted. "Just try," she urged, her eyes full of encouragement. In the small hospital bathroom, I slipped out of my gown and carefully pulled the dress over my head. The fabric was as soft as a cloud, falling around my body in a way that felt like a gentle embrace. It didn't cling or bind. It draped. It flowed. As I clumsily tried to zip it up the back, Emma's hands appeared, her touch warm and sure as she eased the zipper up to my neck. "There," she said softly. I turned to face the small bathroom mirror. The woman I saw was still me, the girl with the new face from the other day. But now she wasn't just a face. The dress softened the lines of my shoulders and hinted at a waist. It swayed gently when I moved, the fabric whispering against my legs. A flush spread across my cheeks, a hot, overwhelming wave of emotion. It was part embarrassment, part terror, but mostly, it was a dizzying, effervescent joy. Emma came to stand behind me, her arms wrapping around my waist. She rested her chin on my shoulder, our reflections side by side in the mirror. "You know," she whispered, her voice low and intimate, a soft caress against my ear. "You're beautiful in a way that you don't even have to try to be." Her words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. A sob caught in my throat. It wasn't a cry of sadness, but of release. It was the sound of a door, locked and barred for decades, finally bursting open. The reflection in the mirror swam and blurred, but I didn't need to see clearly anymore. I could feel it. I was beautiful. I was Olivia. The name came to me on a quiet afternoon, a few weeks after I'd seen my new face for the first time. The sun was streaming through the hospital window, casting long golden rectangles across my bed. I was wearing the dusky blue dress, feeling the soft fabric against my skin. Emma was reading in the chair beside me, her presence a quiet comfort. For my entire life, Robert had felt like a borrowed coat, heavy, ill-fitting, and something I couldn't wait to take off at the end of the day. Olivia had been a secret whisper, a fantasy name for a fantasy person, but lying there, bathed in sunlight, I realized she wasn't a fantasy anymore. She was the one healing, the one feeling the soft brush of rayon against her skin. She was the one looking out at the world through these new, softer eyes. "Emma," I said, my voice quiet but clear. The name felt strange on my new lips. "I think I want to be called Olivia, not just when we're home, always." I looked at her, my heart beating a little faster. It feels like it's been my name all along, just waiting for me to catch up to it. Emma put her book down and a slow, beautiful smile spread across her face. She reached over and took my hand, her thumb stroking my knuckles. She leaned in and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead. "Welcome, Olivia," she whispered. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it felt like the most profound christening. The sound of my new name from her lips was the sweetest music I had ever heard. From that moment on, Robert was gone. He was a ghost from a past life, a name on old documents. I was Olivia. As the weeks turned into months, the subtle magic of the hormones began to truly reveal itself. It wasn't like a switch being flipped. It was more like a slow, gentle tide, gradually reshaping the shoreline of my body. My skin, once rough and prone to stubble, grew softer and smoother. It felt more sensitive, more alive. A light touch from Emma could send shivers down my spine. The sparse, dark hair on my arms and legs thinned, becoming finer and lighter. The most startling and wonderful change was happening on my chest. It started as a faint tenderness, an ache behind my nipples that I at first dismissed as a side effect. But then I noticed small, firm buds forming week by week. They grew, my chest becoming fuller, more sensitive. The first time I felt the soft swell of my growing breasts press against the lace of a bra Emma had bought me. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried with a joy so overwhelming it felt like my heart would burst. It was a tangible, undeniable sign of my transformation. My hips, too. began to soften and round out, a subtle shift in my silhouette that made my movements feel more fluid, more graceful. My emotions underwent a similar softening. The stoic, emotional dam I had built as Robert began to crack and crumble. I found myself crying at commercials, at a beautiful song on the radio, at the simple, profound kindness of a nurse. My feelings were closer to the surface, more accessible, more vibrant. Sometimes, just hearing Emma call me Liv from the other room was enough to fill my eyes with tears of gratitude. It was as if I was experiencing the world in full color for the first time. When I was finally strong enough to walk around the hospital wing on my own, I started making daily trips to the small cafeteria for a change of scenery. It was a terrifying prospect at first, being out in a semi-public space, but I had a simple, shoulder-length brown wig now, and with a bit of tinted moisturizer, Emma taught me how to apply. I felt passably presentable. One afternoon, while I was waiting for my cup of tea, a young man in scrubs from one of the other floors smiled at me. He was one of the residents. I thought his name tag said Daniel. "Are you a new patient?" he asked, his smile friendly and open. "I haven't seen you around before. You look very pretty, especially for someone who's recovering." Heat flooded my cheeks, my ears burning. It was the first time anyone other than Emma or the nurses had commented on my appearance. A man, a stranger, and he had called me pretty. My mind short-circuited. I stammered something incoherent, fumbling for my wallet. Mira, who happened to be in line behind me, stepped up with a chuckle. She put a hand on my arm. "Don't mind Daniel. He's our resident charmer," she said, winking at him. Then she leaned in toward me and added in a lower voice, "She's been hearing that all week, so you'll have to try harder." Daniel just laughed. A good-natured sound? Well, it's true. I wanted to melt into the linoleum floor. I was mortified, flustered, and completely out of my depth. But beneath the tidal wave of embarrassment, a tiny, unfamiliar flower began to bloom in my chest. It was the feeling of being seen, not as a man, not as a curiosity, but as a woman. My body's reaction, the blush, the racing heart, the shy, downward cast of my eyes felt so natural, so utterly right. It was as if my nervous system was finally synced up with my soul. He wasn't flirting with Robert. He was flirting with Olivia. And Olivia, I was discovering, kind of liked it. The day I was discharged from the hospital felt like my real birthday. After months cocooned in that sterile, safe environment, stepping back out into the world was both thrilling and terrifying. Emma had brought me an outfit for the occasion, a pair of dark, fitted skinny jeans, a soft, cream-colored cashmere sweater that felt like a hug, and a pair of simple black ankle boots with a low, comfortable heel. As I dressed, I caught my full reflection in the wardrobe mirror. A long, straight black wig framed my face, the dark strands falling softly against the cream of the sweater. The jeans hugged the new, subtle curves of my hips. For a dizzying moment, I couldn't believe the woman staring back at me was real. She was small and slender, with deep, thoughtful eyes and a gentle curve to her lips. There were no traces of Robert left. None, only Olivia. I placed a hand on my chest, feeling the soft swell of my breasts beneath the cashmere, and smiled. But as we walked toward the hospital exit, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. The hospital had been a bubble. Mira, Dr. Evans, the other nurses, they knew my story. They had been my allies, out there, in the real world. I was a stranger. I was untested. What would people see when they looked at me? Would they see a woman, or would they see a man in a costume? Emma must have sensed my fear. She reached over and laced her fingers through mine, her grip warm and steady. "Ready?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath, as I'll ever be. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and the world rushed in the rumble of traffic, the chatter of people, the crisp autumn air on my face. It was overwhelming. Every sense felt heightened. My first trial came immediately. We needed to stop at the supermarket on the way home. My heart pounded against my ribs as we walked from the car to the entrance. I felt like every eye was on me, a giant spotlight tracking my every move. I kept my head down, focusing on the rhythmic click of my boots on the pavement. "Just breathe, Liv," Emma murmured, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're just a woman going grocery shopping with her wife." Her wife, the words sent a jolt of warmth through me. Inside, the fluorescent lights felt brutally bright. I pushed the cart while Emma navigated the aisles, my movements stiff and self-conscious. I braced myself for stares, for whispers, for pointed fingers, but nothing happened. People walked past us, their minds on their own shopping list. A store employee restocking shelves gave me a brief, polite smile. A group of teenagers, loud and laughing, jostled past without a second glance. No one looked at me like I was a freak. No one looked at me like I was a man. They didn't look at me with any particular interest at all. And it was the most beautiful, liberating feeling in the world. "No one is looking at me," I whispered to Emma in the cereal aisle, a sense of wonder in my voice. She smiled, a knowing, loving smile. She picked up a box of my favorite granola. "That's because you belong, my love. You're just you." That simple realization was a key turning a lock in my soul. I wasn't an imposter. I was just me, Olivia, a woman buying groceries. The knot in my stomach slowly began to unravel. By the time we reached the checkout, I was standing a little taller, my shoulders a little more relaxed. I even managed to make eye contact with the cashier and thank her. That evening, we curled up on the sofa together, the groceries put away, the house quiet and peaceful. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm, flickering glow across the room. I was nestled against Emma, my head on her shoulder, her arm wrapped around me. The cashmere of my sweater was soft against my cheek, and the scent of her perfume was a comforting, familiar cloud. She ran her fingers through the soft fibers of my wig, her touch gentle and soothing. "You know," she said, her voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "You used to hide yourself. All those starched shirts and stiff suits, they were like armor. You kept everyone, even me sometimes, at a distance." I closed my eyes, thinking of the man I used to be, the constant tension in his shoulders, the carefully constructed walls around his heart. "But now," she continued, her voice softening even more, "now you just glow when you smile, live. It's like your whole heart is in it. It lights up the entire room." I shifted, turning to look at her. In the warm firelight, her eyes were full of an adoration so profound it made my breath catch. I snuggled closer, pressing my face into the soft curve of her neck. The HRT had made my skin so sensitive, and the feeling of her skin against mine, the warmth of her body, was intoxicating. It was an intimacy that went deeper than anything we had shared before. As Robert, I had always felt like I was playing a part, even in our most private moments. But as Olivia, lying here in her arms, there were no walls, no armor. There was just me, vulnerable and open and completely, utterly loved. For the first time in my life, I felt truly at home, not just in my house, but in my own skin. A year can change everything. 12 months after walking out of that hospital, the world felt like a different place because I was a different person. The journey hadn't stopped at my front door. It had just begun. There were still moments of doubt, flashes of fear when I caught a stranger's lingering glance, but they were growing fewer and farther between. They were being crowded out by moments of simple, profound joy. The hormones had worked their slow, steady magic, sculpting my body in ways I had only dreamed of. I stood before the same antique mirror where Robert had once struggled with his tie, but the man was now a distant memory, a sepia-toned photograph from another life. The woman looking back was Olivia. Her face, my face, was soft and natural, the last traces of surgical swelling long gone. My eyes, which had always seemed guarded, were now open and expressive. My skin was clear and luminous. The sleek black wig had been replaced by my own hair, which I'd carefully grown out into a chic, jaw-length bob that Emma helped me style every morning. My breasts were full and round, a constant, wonderful presence beneath my clothes. My waist had tapered, and my hips had curved, giving me a silhouette that made me feel graceful and whole every time I slipped on a dress. Tonight, I was wearing the emerald green one, the silk dress that had once hung on my closet door like a painful reminder of a life I couldn't live. Now, it draped over my body as if it were made for me. The silk was cool and fluid against my skin, and the color, Emma had been right, made the green in my eyes sparkle. I wasn't looking at a reflection and seeing tattered remnants of Robert. I was just seeing Olivia, and she was smiling. "You're going to be late," Emma's voice called from the doorway. I turned, my smile widening. She was breathtaking. She wore a simple, elegant black dress that highlighted her own timeless beauty. But the most beautiful thing about her was the look in her eyes as she watched me. It was a look of pure, unadulterated love. "It's our anniversary," she said, her voice soft. "I know our wedding anniversary is in the spring, but I feel like tonight is an anniversary for us, too, for the life we started a year ago." I walked to her and took her hand. "Every day with you feels like a celebration." She insisted on driving, keeping our destination a secret. The restaurant she finally pulled up to stole my breath away. It was a small, elegant place with twinkling lights woven through the trees out front and the soft glow of candlelight visible through the windows. It was the place Robert had taken Emma on their first date a dozen years ago. A pang of my old anxiety flickered. Was this a mistake coming here, to a place so steeped in our past? But Emma just squeezed my hand. "New memories," she whispered, "for the new us." The maitre d' greeted us with a warm smile. "Good evening, ladies. Reservation for Miller." He didn't blink. He just led us to a quiet corner booth. The best table in the house. The evening was perfect. We talked and laughed, our conversation easy and flowing. We reminisced not about the man Robert Alls, but about the love that had been strong enough to endure his fear, strong enough to help Olivia be born. Under the warm, intimate glow of the candle on our table, I felt more myself, more at peace, than I ever had in my life. After dessert, as we were sipping our wine, Emma's expression grew serious. She reached across the table and took both of my hands in hers. "Olivia," she began, her voice a little shaky, "the past year, watching you blossom, watching you become the person you were always meant to be, it has been the greatest privilege of my life. I fell in love with a beautiful soul all those years ago, a soul that was trapped, and now that soul is free, and it's even more beautiful than I could have ever imagined." Tears welled in my eyes. Before I could speak, she slipped off her seat and knelt on the floor beside our table. My heart stopped. She pulled a small velvet box from her purse. She opened it. Inside was a ring, a delicate, white gold band with a single, perfect emerald nestled in the center. It was a perfect match for my dress. "Olivia Miller," she said, her own eyes shining with tears. "I know we're already married, but I want to ask you again. I want to ask you, the real you, will you marry me again as the incredible, beautiful woman you are? Will you let me be your wife for the rest of our lives?" A sob escaped my lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated happiness. The other diners turned to look, not with judgment, but with soft, knowing smiles. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. I couldn't find the words, so I just nodded, tears streaming down my face. A delicate silver necklace Emma had given me, a small phoenix pendant, vibrated against my collarbone as I sobbed, like a tiny, joyful bell. Emma's laugh was the most beautiful sound in the world as she slid the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. She was my wife, and I was hers, reborn and whole, finally and forever. The idea began, as most important things do, as a quiet conversation over coffee, several months after our second engagement. Emma and I found ourselves sitting in a sun-drenched cafe, planning our future. We were going to renew our vows in a small ceremony in the spring, but our conversations kept circling back to the journey that had brought us here. "I can't stop thinking about how lucky I was," I said, tracing the rim of my cup. "I had you. I had the insurance to cover the surgeries. I had a doctor who listened. What happens to the people who don't have any of that? The people who get into accidents and just get patched back up into a life they don't want?" Emma reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "Then we help them." The thought was like a spark, and we knew just who to call to help us fan it into a flame. Mira met us at the same hospital where my new life had begun. She wasn't our nurse anymore. She was our friend. We sat in that familiar, sterile-smelling cafeteria. But this time, I felt no fear, only purpose. We laid out our vision for her. We wanted to start a nonprofit, a fund to help people who, through trauma or accident, were given the rare and terrifying opportunity to rebuild not just their faces, but their identities. We wanted to provide financial grants for surgeries, access to therapy, and a network of compassionate medical professionals. We want to call it the Phoenix Foundation, I said, my voice filled with a conviction I never would have possessed a year ago. I unconsciously touched the small pendant at my neck. Because we've all been through the fire. We all deserve the chance to be reborn from the ashes. Mira's eyes, those impossibly kind eyes that had been one of the first things I saw after my world fell apart, filled with tears. "Olivia," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "that is the most beautiful idea I have ever heard." With Mira's guidance and her extensive network within the medical community, our idea began to take shape. We spent our evenings not planning a wedding, but drafting a mission statement, outlining bylaws, and building a website. We collected stories anonymous at first from people who had felt trapped, just as I had. Each story was a painful echo of my own, a reminder of the quiet desperation that lives behind so many eyes. The foundation's launch was a small affair, held in a rented community hall. We invited friends, colleagues, and the medical team who had so carefully pieced me back together. Dr. Evans was there, his warm smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Standing at the podium, with Emma by my side holding my hand, I told my story. I spoke of Robert, of the accident, of the terror, and the hope. I spoke of the first time I felt the slide of satin against my skin, the first time I saw Olivia's face in the mirror. My voice didn't shake. The words flowed from a place of deep, hard-won truth. My old life burned away on a dark stretch of highway, I concluded, my gaze sweeping across the faces in the room. But from that fire, something true was born. The Phoenix Foundation is our promise that no one has to walk through that fire alone. It is our promise that everyone deserves to see their true self when they look in the mirror. After the speeches, a young woman approached me, her eyes hesitant. "Your story," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "It's like you were telling my story." I took her hand, my heart swelling with a new kind of love, not romantic love, but a deep, fierce, protective empathy. "You are not alone," I told her, and I knew, with a certainty that resonated in my very bones, that this was why I had survived. This was my purpose. Later that evening, back home, Emma and I stood in front of our mirror, just as we had on that fateful morning so long ago. She wrapped her arms around my waist from behind, and we looked at our reflections together. Two women, two wives, their images intertwined. The emerald on my finger caught the light, flashing a brilliant green. "You're saving lives, you know," she murmured into my hair. I shook my head, a small smile on my lips. "We are," I corrected her softly, "and we're just getting started." The reflection that looked back at me was no longer a stranger. It wasn't a work in progress or a project to be completed. It was just me, Olivia, home, and the small flame that had been kindled in the wreckage of an accident had now become a beacon, ready to light the way for others.